Before Pythagoras spoke about the immortality of the soul, before Heraclitus declared that everything flows, before Parmenides argued that reality itself never changes, there was a strange figure from a tiny Greek island who stood directly between myth and philosophy. A man who still spoke in the language of gods, but was already trying to explain the structure of existence itself. His name was Pherecydes of Syros, and almost nobody talks about him anymore. Yet ancient writers believed he may have been one of the first Greeks to teach the immortality of the soul, reincarnation, cosmic order, and a universe governed not merely by divine chaos, but by intelligible principles. Aristotle himself said Pherecydes was a thinker who did not speak entirely in mythical language. That sentence is more important than it sounds, because it marks one of the greatest transformations in human history, the moment mythology slowly began turning into philosophy. This is the story of Pherecydes of Syros. Pherecydes lived around the 6th century BCE on the island of Syros on the Aegean Sea. Very little about his life is certain. In fact, almost everything about him comes in fragments, rumors, and later testimonies written centuries after his death. That already tells you something. Pherecydes stands at the edge of reported philosophy, in a twilight zone where history and legend blur together. Some ancient sources claimed he traveled widely and learned secret teachings from the Phoenicians. Others said he taught Pythagoras himself. Was that true? Probably not literally, but the fact that later generations connected him to Pythagoras reveals something else. They saw Pherecydes as a spiritual ancestor of mystical philosophy. Not merely a storyteller, not merely a priest, but something new, a proto-philosopher, a bridge figure, a thinker standing between the sacred myths of theogony and the rational investigations of the Presocratics. And unlike earlier Greek thinkers, Pherecydes reportedly wrote in prose rather than poetry. That sounds small today, but in ancient Greece, that was revolutionary. Poetry belonged to myth, memory, and divine inspiration. Prose suggested explanation, analysis, with reasoning. It was the beginning of philosophy speaking in its own voice. Most early Greek cosmologies began with chaos, but Pherecydes did something radically different. He claimed that 3 eternal principles always existed: Zos, Chronos, and Chthoni. Not created, not born, eternal. And immediately we can see philosophy beginning to emerge. Because instead of asking which god came first, Pherecydes started asking, what are the primordial principles underlying reality itself? Zos was a form of Zeus, but not exactly the Olympian Zeus people usually imagine. Chronos was time itself. Not the Titan Chronos merely as a mythological character, but time as a cosmic generative force. And Chthoniya represented the deep earth, the primordial feminine ground of existence. This is extraordinary already. Reality is no longer explained purely through family drama among anthropomorphic gods. Instead, existence emerges from metaphysical principles: being, time, and earth. This is one of the earliest moments in Western thought where mythology starts transforming into ontology, not just stories about gods, but theories about reality. One of Pherecydes' strangest ideas is that Chronos, time, generates creation itself. Time becomes the architect of existence. This is centuries ahead of its era. Think about how radical this is. In many myths, time is just the stage in which events happen. But for Pherecydes, time is productive, creative, active. Time gives birth to worlds. Chronos creates fire, air, and water. And places them into mysterious cosmic recesses called the Machoi, hidden chambers or cavities of existence. This became as the Pentamikos or Heptamikos, the 5 chambers or the 7 chambers. The original text is lost, but we possess only fragments quoted by later writers. But even these fragments feel hauntingly ancient and symbolic. The cosmos emerges not through creation from nothing, but through ordering, arrangement, structuring chaos into intelligible form. And here again, philosophy is emerging from mythology, because later Greek thinkers would obsess over this exact problem. How does order arise from disorder? How does cosmos emerge from chaos? Pherecydes was among the first to ask it philosophically. Then comes one of the most beautiful moments in Greek early thought. Zos marries Chthoni. But this is not merely divine romance, it's cosmic symbolism. According to surviving fragments, Zos creates an enormous robe embroidered with the earth, oceans, and cosmic structures, and then presents it to Chthone during their marriage ritual. And then in receiving the robe, Chthone becomes Gaia, the recognizable earth itself. Think about what this means. The world is woven into existence, reality is crafted like art, the cosmos becomes sacred tapestry. This imagery would echo through later Greek mysticism, Orphism, and even Platonic cosmology. And notice something else. Unlike Hesiod's violent divine struggles, Pherecydes increasingly describes creation through harmony, union, and ordering principles. One scholarly interpretation even notes that Zos transforms into Eros during creation, suggesting love itself becomes a cosmic organizing force. That idea will later explode across Greek philosophy. For Empedocles, love becomes a cosmic force. For Plato, Eros becomes the soul's longing towards truth and transcendence. Pherecydes may represent one of the earliest seeds of that tradition. But the universe is not born peacefully. Pherecydes also describes a cosmic struggle between Zos and serpent-like being called the Ophion, or Ophionius. Because giant chaos serpents appear across ancient civilizations, Mesopotamia, Egypt, Canaanite mythology, Norse mythology, and even later Abrahamic traditions. The serpent often symbolizes primordial chaos, the untamed abyss, disorder before civilization. And Pherecydes inserts this archetype directly into Greek cosmology. The battle ends with Ophion being cast into Oceanus, the encircling cosmic waters. Again, we see the same recurring pattern. Order defeating chaos, form defeating the abyss, meaning overcome dissolution. This would become one of the deepest reoccurring structures in Western thought. But perhaps Pherecydes' most influential idea involved the human soul. Ancient writers credited him as one of the earliest Greeks to teach metempsychosis, the transmigration of souls. In other words, the soul survives death and may enter another body. This doctrine later becomes central to Pythagoreanism, Ophism, and eventually parts of Platonism. Now imagine hearing this in the 6th century BCE. Most early Greek religion focused heavily on ritual and sacrifice, not systematic theories of the soul's eternal journey. Pherecydes helped transform spirituality into metaphysics, and once again he sits at a crossroads, part mystic, part theologian, part philosopher. A thinker trying to understand not merely what gods desire, but what reality itself is. At first glance, Pherecydes can seem obscure, a half-lost figure buried beneath giants like Socrates and Plato, but historically, he is important, because he represents a mutation in human consciousness. Earlier myth explained the world through divine narrative alone. Later philosophy sought rational principles. Pherecydes stands directly between those worlds. Aristotle described him as someone who mixed myth and philosophy together. And that's what makes him fascinating. He had not fully escaped mythology, but he was beginning to think abstractly about time and being, cosmic structure, immortality, and the principles underlying existence. He's one of the first Europeans we can point to and say, this person was trying to philosophize reality itself. Not merely repeat inherited stories, but reinterpret them, transform them, think beyond them. Now, when people think of and talk about the birth of philosophy, they usually jump straight to Thales, Anaximander, or Heraclitus. But Pherecydes reveals something more complicated. Philosophy did not suddenly appear overnight. It emerged gradually from myth, from religion, from symbolic storytelling. The earliest philosophers were not cold rationalists. They were cosmic interpreters, mystics of structure, poets becoming metaphysicians. And Pherecydes may embody that transformation more than almost anyone. He stands at the threshold of two worlds, one enchanted, one analytical, one ruled by sacred myth, the other by rational inquiry. And in him, those worlds still overlap. Today, only fragments of Pherecydes survive. Broken lines, secondhand testimonies, ancient rumors, yet somehow that feels appropriate, because Pherecydes himself was a fragment of mythology becoming philosophy, a fragment of religion becoming metaphysics, a fragment of humanity learning to ask not only who are the gods, but what is reality? And from that question, Western philosophy was born.